In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts Alex and Sean. On this episode, we're going to be talking about some more Bears hiring, talking Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs and Sox, and more. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season is going on right now, so make sure you head on over to icehogs.com. Get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, how are you feeling? Uh, we are several days into Ben Johnson being the official head coach of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, so it was really nice. He had his presser on Wednesday, and I work from home on Wednesdays, and I was on a big client call from 10 to 11. And like 11 to 12 is usually when I eat lunch. So I'm thinking, okay, if this ends at 11, it'll be perfect time for me to take my break and watch the presser. And that's exactly what happened. And boy, there were several things about that presser. The fact that did you notice they weren't doing it in their normal spot at Hallis Hall? Like they were doing it in the bigger area. They don't
Yes.
usually do the pressers there. The fact that Caleb Williams was there, Cole Kmet, DJ Moore, there was one other. Was it Roma Dunze? I think there were four players there, but obviously you saw Caleb looking like he was coming out of the Matrix. But the fact that they were there and
DJ Moore said that he looked like Dracula.
oh yeah, that too, because he was wearing a cross too. So yeah, it was kind of funny watching him walk in like that. But you saw the clip of the day before, right? When he first arrived at Hallis Hall to sign the contract, and everyone was there clapping and cheering in Hallis Hall. Tell me this: do you remember Matt Eberflus getting that kind of greeting, or even Matt Nagy? Because I sure don't.
No, that did not happen.
All I remember was like Nagy and Eberflus flying in on the private jet and like Ryan Pace waiting for Nagy out in the hangar, and he gave the thumbs up. But this was like the hero's welcome where the whole staff at Hallis Hall was waiting in the main lobby for him to come in, and he makes that little motivational speech and that welcome speech. Everything about it just seemed bigger. And obviously we'll get into what he actually said, but I mean, you can tell that the people at Hallis Hall have been dying to have somebody of this pedigree, and he's finally here. The fact that everybody seems to be bought in, there's no convincing, there's no, well, I know, but if you look at this, the pomp and circumstance is far greater than any other hire we've seen before.
Yeah, the expectations are clearly higher. The excitement is a lot higher. And this is not just with the fans, it's with the media and Hallis Hall itself, the players. This just feels different than anything we've had in a long time.
Yes, yes. And I think one other thing that was notable too was when they walked in, everybody was walking in, and you saw Caleb and you saw the players, and you saw something that you didn't really see much of throughout the season: smiles, happiness, actual.
Get back to work.
Hey, they would happily do it for him. I don't know if they do it for the last guy.
True, true.
But there
But
was happiness in the air. Did we see that during last season, especially after the Hail Mary? No.
it's funny because Matt Eberflus was like trying to be, I don't know, rah-rah guy is the right term, but like likable and fun, and it just never really came off. It came off like kind of annoying and disingenuous. And Ben Johnson's not coming in like with stupid acronyms or dumb nicknames. He's coming in here and he just sounds competent and he sounds like he's got a plan and everything he said has been the right thing so far.
Yeah, I mean, number one, not a single acronym. That warms my heart. And to your point about Matt Eberflus, it was like watching the sixth grade basketball coach. And you see where the intention could be, but you know what? This is the National Football League. And in the National Football League, you need an alpha. Matt Eberflus might be a really nice guy. And he might know defense very, very well. His track record shows that. But boy, the mannerisms, the way he talks, there wasn't one time I looked at him and said, that's an NFL head coach. There isn't one time I looked at him and said, you know what? Other teams would die to have that. Meanwhile, people watch Dan Campbell. Like, people who hate the Lions are like, man, I would run through a brick wall for that guy. You could say the same thing about Kevin O'Connell. You could say the same thing about Andy Reid because of how successful he's been. Obviously, we know how good a guy like Sean McVay is. We know how good Sean Payton is. But guys like Reid, Payton, and even McVay have been around a few years where, Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, they're fairly new, but you see the impacts they've made in their short tenures already as NFL coaches, even if it's been just a few years. That's the kind of guy that we know the Bears need, and the Bears players, that's what they want. They're flat out asking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they literally not even veiled, like overtly asking for that.
Yeah, they've talked on podcasts, they've talked to the media, they've made posts on social media. And when you got Jaquan Brisker excitedly tweeting, it's a new day, when you saw Ben Johnson addressing his players, saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. The bar is going to be set higher than it ever has before. That was genuine. Okay. I mean, obviously we need to see the results, but that was genuine. The way he looked at them and addressed them. And I think the players felt that too. And they deserved to hear it. They needed to hear it. And I can tell you right now, I think the team is already ready to run through a brick wall for him more than they ever were his predecessor. So let me ask you this. First of all, what was your favorite thing that he said in that presser? What stood out to you?
The number one thing was that he was throwing out his Detroit playbook and he was going to basically rebuild a playbook around the players that he has.
You literally read my mind because that's what I wanted to address.
We have had nothing but people in here, and most notably Matt Nagy and Mike Martz, who were unwilling and unable to build what their system did around the players they had. They needed specific players to make their system work. And that's that's not the sign of a great coach. Like, you could be an effective coach. There's been plenty of effective coaches that need specific types of players to make it work and have been successful. But that's not the sign of a great coach. Is he's looking exactly what he has, because you're not going to fit a square peg in a round hole. You had Jared Goff is a much different quarterback than Caleb Williams, and you're looking at the talent that you have, and you're like, how am I going to optimize this? And sure, I'm sure there's going to be core plays that he wants to do, but he's trying to establish the run, and I'm sure there's types of players that he likes that he's going to try to get Ryan Pace to acquire in the draft or through free agency or trades. But the fact that you're going to gear the playbook to the talent you have is huge to me. It's something I've wanted to hear for a long time. And it makes me feel like even though the Bears did the dumb thing of keeping the cycle going of having a head coach and then inherit a quarterback and then get a new quarterback and then fire the coach and that cycle, it feels like this is going to be broken. Even though he had, Caleb Williams and he didn't choose Caleb Williams. I mean, I guess he sort of did. We can get to that in a minute, but um it's he's going to build around the quarterback he has to make him the most successful in this offense.
Well, wasn't it Dave once that when he came over, he was the hot defensive coordinator from the Cowboys, and the talk was, well, back in Dallas this, back in Dallas that. Uh, the How often has the imitation game worked? I mean, it certainly hasn't worked for the Bears. And like you said, Jared Goff and Caleb Williams are two very different quarterbacks. Obviously, the Lions are elite in the trenches, and they're going to be elite in the trenches for a long time, and the Bears need to build up to be elite in the trenches. So you have a big difference in the type of team that you have. So the fact that Ben Johnson is going to tailor this to what he has, it's a breath of fresh air. And, I'm going to say this too. When you look at what the Bears have, the weaknesses are in the trenches on both sides of the ball. But what Ben Johnson did was acknowledge the talent that they do already have. So you know that they're going to improve in that area. And as it was talked about by Ryan Poles, and we talked about this last week, Ben Johnson's going to have a big say in how they optimize this roster this offseason. But he acknowledged the fact, too, that, hey, you have DJ Moore, you have Roma Dunze, you have Cole Kmet, you have guys on this roster. So he knows that he has things to work with while being able to help to build this roster up further in the places where it needs help.
Right. And and I want them to be a cohesive unit. And I want Ben Johnson to have a lot of input on who they get, and then Ryan Pace be the conduit to just go get that player.
You mean Ryan Poles?
Sorry, Ryan Poles. I want
I
Ryan Poles.
collaborated. I'm collaborating with Ben Johnson.
Yeah, I want Ryan Poles to be the guy that goes and gets it. Like, hey, this we need a running back that has elite speed. All right, let's go get it. Or I need a blocking tight end who's not 45 years old. Okay, let me go get that guy. Um, and that be that kind of collaboration.
So what you're saying is you don't think Mercedes Lewis is going to be back next year?
I don't know. I honestly don't. Um, I would love him back, but who knows how that plays out.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Um, so another thing about the presser was I was talking to my mom the other day, and she used to be a big football fan as a kid. She's not, as big of a football or sports person as she once was in her youth, but you know, so point being, she doesn't pay attention to the details and has the in-depth knowledge of the game that, a modern sports fan that watches football every week does. And even she pointed out, she's like, man, that new coach for the Bears, I watched him on TV. He is really clear, concise, and polished. So he's making great first impressions really everywhere, which is obviously a big thing because, you know, I remember when Matt Nagy was hired. I thought he made a pretty good first impression. I did. I can't say the same thing about Matt Eberflus at all. We play by the hits principle. Yeah. And then obviously you had John Fox, who's, I'm just here to get paid. And then you had Mark Trestman. You're like, who the hell is this guy? He sounds smart, but can he be a leader of men? Now, the qualities that Ben Johnson shows, there's little doubt in my mind that he can be a leader of men. And obviously, if you're winning, that makes your job as, quote, being a leader of men much easier. But the fact that I think he can communicate very well and people can understand, where he's coming from, what he wants, his vision, I mean, that's really important because we can't always say we've had that at Hallis Hall, right?
Right. Have you been watching on online the Lion fan reactions to Ben Johnson leaving to come to the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's what I'll say. I understand being salty. You know, you have a guy that was a huge part of your success go to a division rival. I'd be really, really, really salty too. I understand that, but some of the absurd things that are being said, it's like, listen, you know, this happens all the time. Coordinators get hired for head coaching jobs all the time. This isn't unique. This isn't new. And listen, I know there's some frustration over the way they went out in the first round. Were they really focused on the game or were they focused on their next jobs? That goes for Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. But you know what? The Lions defense was hella banged up. And Ben Johnson, sure, there were a few play calls that I thought were questionable, as there would be with every coordinator in every single game. But Ben Johnson did not call the Jared Goff throw multiple back-breaking picks uh, call. He did not. And look, I get you're salty. I do. But some of the takes are absurd. They really are. And let yourself grieve, obviously. I get there's a period with that. But man, if you're questioning a guy's loyalty who stuck around for multiple years when he easily could have been hired as a head coach, I don't know about that one. He could have been hired as a head coach 2 years ago, and he wanted to finish unfinished business in Detroit. But eventually, he was going to go take that head coaching job, the one that he wanted. And he said he wanted this one. He'd be stupid not to. But he stuck around for several years when he didn't have to. So I'll just point that out.
I mean, the man was super loyal. He stayed there a long time. He could have left 2 years ago. He stayed. Could have left last year. Stayed. Um, and he decided to leave this year. And it's a huge difference. He's going to be the seventh highest paid head coach in the NFL. Like the guesstimates were that he was making like $3.5 million a year as the offensive coordinator for the Lions, and now he's making what 13 a year. So
Yeah,
that's $9.5 million a year more. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of
yeah,
money to be able to, uh, you know, be the person who gets credit, or have say of work. Um, it's a huge opportunity for a marquee franchise.
it is. And look, if I had a great offensive coordinator, he went to the Packers. Okay, I'd be salty. I get it. I do. Um, but like I said, I don't think you could question a man's loyalty. And this happens every year in the NFL. It's part of the NFL. People get hired, people get promotions, and that's not just for Ben Johnson. They also hired another coach from the Detroit Lions as well, the
True.
former Redskin and Chicago Cubs draft pick.
Antoine Randall L.
Yeah, guy played what, 8, 9 years in the NFL?
He played a while.
Yeah. That was a nice hire. That I like that hire. And you see some of the footage of him on the Detroit Lions sideline. You're like, that's a coach. That's a coach I could get behind. I love his energy. I love his passion. Um, and he's local. Isn't he from around here?
He went to Thornton Fractional High School. He is from Cook County, the Chicagoland area.
So there you go. Local guy coming home, and I'm sure the players will love him, and he's pretty well regarded. So I think that's a pretty big hire by Ben Johnson. And this coaching staff is coming together because over the past I don't know half hour, two of the biggest questions have just been plugged. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes, Dennis Allen, who was the worst kept secret um, that we had, is going to be the defensive coordinator, and Declan Doyle um, is going to be the offensive coordinator who does not call plays.
Right, exactly. Now, here's where I think this is important. Dennis Allen, he's got the experience. He's you know, done this rodeo many, many times. And what I think is important for a coach like Ben Johnson, who is first year head coach, focused on the offense, calling the plays, is you hire a guy who knows what he's doing on defense, where he says, hey, Dennis Allen, you're in charge of the defense. You put the system together. You help tell us what guys we need to go after. You put it together. You focus on that. I will focus being the head coach and the offensive mind here. So I think you really needed to hire an experienced guy like Dennis Allen to take that job. And you look at Dennis Allen. I think you're going to see what I've wanted to see a bit more from the Bears defense over the past few years, a bit more man-to-man coverage, and I believe he's a 4-3.
He is
So,
a 4-3, and
yeah.
he's much more aggressive than Matt Eberflus.
There were just with the Matt Eberflus defense, even when things were going well, it just you had way too many cushions. Way, way, way too many cushions. And how many times under the Eberflus regime did we see them give so much of a cushion that they let the other team convert on like 3rd and 13, 3rd and 12? We saw that way too many damn times.
Yeah, and so he hired an experienced defensive coordinator with head coaching experience, which is nice. It's nice to have somebody with that experience that it's you can lean on them a little bit. And then you hire a young up and comer for your offensive coordinator position,
And
which
this is a guy that comes from the Peyton tree, if
yes,
that means anything.
yes. Um, yeah, he was I believe he was under Sean Payton at the Saints too, and then came over with Denver.
Yeah, so he's been with the guy for a while, and now he's got a chance to coach with a very young up and comer in Ben Johnson. So, hey, I have no complaints. So, wow, he's only 28.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a guy that I would be shocked if he got hired away as a head coach right away, just because he's young and he's not the play caller.
But you know what's nice about that? Your play caller is Ben Johnson. So if that
Correct.
happens, okay.
Yeah. You groom somebody else. The other rumor was that it could be David Shaw, and I wouldn't have been sad about that one either because he has a long history of working with Jim Harbaugh. He's been a head coach, albeit in college. He was a head coach for a long time. Really, really well liked and well respected guy. He's another leader of men, and uh, and he has front office history as well as offensive coordinator and defensive backs coach and head coach. So that would have been a nice hire too, but I'm less concerned about that. The Bears did try to bring over Hank Fraley, who was the offensive line coach for the
Detroit.
Lions
Hmm.
and under working with Ben Johnson, but different varying reports. One that he just decided to stay in Chicago or in Detroit, and the other one being that Ben Johnson didn't want to raid too many coaches from the Lions staff. And I don't know where everything actually lies, but either way, he's staying in Detroit. I think that would have been a coup had they gotten him, because I'm sure he would have been the non play calling offensive coordinator slash offensive line coach. But we'll see now where the offensive line coach comes from because that was one of the positions I was really interested in and how they went about and how they're going to handle that because Chris Morgan needed to go.
Yeah, and Chris Morgan is gone. Thomas Brown is gone. The one that I heard they were retaining was Richard Hightower, the special teams coach.
That's correct. So they were trying to get I forget who. Um, they were trying to get somebody, and he opted to not come to Chicago. Oh, it was Darren Rizzi. Um, and he opted not to come to Chicago, and they retained Richard Hightower because I think he was Plan B. Richard Hightower is another really well-respected coach, and I know a lot of people will, try to throw him under the bus because a couple of blocked kicks, but um, it's hard when you have a kicker that doesn't have a super powerful leg and he kicks low to get more distance.
Right.
Um, that's not always the coach's fault. You can't coach stronger leg. Um, but for that he also had the fake kick that scored a touchdown and um or the fake reception and the punt
Yeah,
to
in
get the
Green Bay.
touchdown against Green Bay. Had you not had that, you don't beat Green Bay.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, would I rather have him over Chris Tabor? No, but if that's not an option, then I'm not going to gripe too much about it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think these coordinators were probably fairly lined up already because they announced um, positional coaches already before the coordinators. And I don't think you force, like, it's not the normal way to force, um, positional coaches onto coordinators like that. So I feel like they probably had them in place. And because of the Rooney rule, you don't have to go through the Rooney rule for all your positional players or positional coaches, just for the head coach and the offense and defensive coordinator, maybe special teams too. But the positional coaches you don't, so they could just hire who they want, and then once they went through their official process, they can just announce those coordinators. So, um, you know, they hired Al Harris from Dallas, who really well regarded by Cowboys fans and Cowboys media. They loved him. Um, I have a Cowboys fan friend who texted me. Actually, he texted me before I saw it, and he's like, really great pickup. I hate you guys.
Well, what does he think of their new coach?
I texted him back, and I was like, sorry, bro. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of what expected to happen. Um, yeah, they swapping Al Harris for Matt Eberflus is not a flex.
No, no. Yeah, things in Cowboy Land are looking kind of bleak right now, but going back to the Bears, obviously, one other thing that I thought I should address is can't believe we're going to say this, but I think they actually did this right. All the way to the top. Ben Johnson said in his interview, the first thing he said, I want this job. The last thing he said, I want this job. And when Ryan Poles said, you know what? I want to give you the job. And he went to George McCaskey. George McCaskey said, go get him. There was no mock press conference. There was no consultation with Ernie Accorsi or Bill Polian. They actually did the process the way we wanted them to. And obviously, they interviewed so many people, and some of them made us scratch our heads a little bit. And I'm not just talking about satisfying the Rooney rule, but
Can I ask you a question?
yes.
Now that we're seeing how this sort of played out, do you think some of that was the number of folks that they brought in the wide net? Do you think some of that was a smokescreen? Because it sounds like I mean, it sounds like back channels were made and there was communication because um, Ben Johnson alluded to that he had his people do their homework and made connections, you know, to Ryan Poles. So it sounds like there was some sort of back channel communication. And listening to Ben Johnson's agent, it sounds like it was always the Bears' job. So I wonder if a lot of that was just smokescreen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a mix of smokescreen and the Bears genuinely wanting to do their due diligence. Because as critical as I've been of Kevin Warren, I do think that him doing his due diligence is just part of his work ethic. And I do think that it's going to be something to keep an eye out on. Obviously, the stadium thing has been really messy, but I do think having him in the building with this process, you might have seen the value of Kevin Warren there. And again, I'm not saying that made or breaked Ben Johnson coming here, but the fact that there was no Ernie Accorsi, Bill Polian, mock press conference, any of that stuff, makes me like to think that they were doing stuff different. Because frankly, I didn't think things were looking different at all at the initial end of year presser when they were talking about the committees and having George involved and having, both Poles and Warren being part of this. I'm like, okay, this feels like the same old crap, but they ended up bringing in all these guys and talking to them. And again, I do think a smokescreen is part of it, but you know, the fact that George said he went to Ryan Poles and said, "Who's your guy?" Like that to me is it shows me, hey, they went to the guy they said was going to make the final decision because they said Ryan Poles made the final decision. That they went to him and said, "Yep, that's the guy." Again, we don't know everything that happens behind the scenes, but I think they might have actually done things right in the end, even though originally it looked like it wasn't going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I still think, despite the Bears getting it right, I still think that they did not deserve the benefit of the doubt because they
No,
haven't earned
they
it.
didn't. No, of course not.
And who knows how things actually went? Maybe it was a dysfunctional search. Maybe it was casting this wide net. And maybe it was this one of those situations where a broken clock is right twice a day situation that they got Ben Johnson. I don't know, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that you're right, that maybe the Bears have learned a lesson and maybe George is going to step back and and that Ryan Poles is going to be able to, spread his wings and Ben Johnson is going to come in and keep this ship righted. Uh, that's my hope.
Mine too.
I'm not going to. I will admit, I bought a new Bears hat. Um,
Well, now we're screwed.
but so I will say that I've begun the ingredient hunt for meatball sauce. Um, but I have not started making meatballs or started simmering the sauce because I'm going to try to temper expectations.
It's just sitting in a massive Hunt's can. The can is like an oil drum size. Your wife comes home. Sean, why are there giant drum sized cans of Hunt's meatball sauce in here? Shut up. Don't worry about it.
Mind your business. Don't tell me my business, devil woman.
You have the tub in the background with logs underneath ready to hit the fire whenever you need to.
Uh,
Well, listen, I get it, man, because you know what? How many times have we been, sold the magic beans and it hasn't worked and it seemed like everything was going to be 100%
legumes,
different.
magic legumes.
Here, have some magic legumes. This is a crayon.
Uh, yeah. So I do like the way that the staff is coming together. Young offensive mind, to help you out. An experienced wide receiver coach who you made an assist, not only wide receiver coordinator or wide receiver coach, the assistant head coach. Um, so uh, makes it much harder for them, somebody to poach him. Al Harris, a good name, Dennis Allen, um, and then JT. Um, it's nice to see how it's coming together. Richard Hightower obviously staying here, so you got some semblance of cohesion, and that's usually the case. It's pretty typical when a new head coach comes in to keep at least one of the assistants, uh, and just so there's you know you know somewhat how things worked previously, both the good, bad, and the ugly. So
Hmm.
Richard Hightower is as good as anybody. I know some Bears fans thought maybe Thomas Brown, and um, had they hired him, I don't know if I would have wanted him as offensive coordinator,
No.
but passing game coordinator, maybe quarterback coach, I wouldn't have been sad. Um, but he decided to bring in his own people, so I'm good with it. There's Richard Hightower has been a offensive or a special teams coordinator for a long time, so it's not a step up for him. Dennis Allen has been a head coach and a defensive coordinator, so this is not a step up. Ben Johnson has called plays. This is not a step up. You have people that know how to do their job coming in. Antoine Randall L. played wide receiver and was a wide receiver coach. JT Barrett was a wide or a quarterback coach. So you have people coming in that did their jobs previously. This is not promotions necessarily. And Declan Doyle, it is a promotion, but he's not a play caller, so he gets to ease into this. Um, so I'm happy how this is turning out so far. Um, now it's going to be the next big one is who's going to be the offensive line coach because I think that's really important.
Yep, for sure. And I'm going to trust Ben Johnson to make that right hire. And for Thomas Brown, you know, I hope he gets a job somewhere. Wasn't he talking with the Patriots? Wasn't there a rumor about? I don't really know
No, I
what the
think it was the
status is on
Seahawks.
that.
I think it
Was
was
it
the
the
Seahawks.
Seahawks?
Yeah, and they ended up hiring who did they hire? Clint Kubiak, I think.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, when it comes to Thomas Brown, I wish him all the best. I don't think he deserves any heat for his time as a head coach because the guy was a passing games coordinator, then had to take over the play calling duties as the offensive coordinator, then had to become a head coach. And I think that everybody knew in that building. I think they all liked Thomas Brown, but both Thomas Brown and everyone in that building knew that Thomas Brown was over his head. I mean, and it's not an insult to him. It
No,
just,
and that just happens. I mean,
yeah,
there's been, I mean, look, Bill Belichick when he was with the Browns was in over his head, and he became arguably the greatest head coach of all time. Um, so it's one of those things. It's just wasn't his time and wasn't the place, and he was put in a tough position to rise to the occasion.
right, exactly. So, absolutely no hard feelings to him. And you know what? If that's the only game he ever is a head coach, he will be 1-0 lifetime against the Packers in Lambeau Field. The fact that Matt Eberflus didn't win a single game against the Packers and Thomas Brown did. You know who doesn't have a winning record against the Packers? Matt Eberflus, Matt Nagy, John Fox, Mark Trestman, Lovie Smith, Dave Wanstead. But Thomas Brown does. So he will always be a quote Bears legend for that alone. So give him that. And the other thing too is I would not have been mad if they retained Thomas Brown, but I do understand that maybe it would be a little weird. It's like, okay, you have a brand new head coach. Here was a guy that like wore every hat, including the main one, and he's kind of just back as a staff member. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I don't know. I think it. I think it's good for Thomas Brown and the Bears that they find their new ways. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Um, Another thing after watching the football games today, uh, Ryan Poles made the mistake. He should have ponied up the extra money to go Saquon Barkley over DeAndre Swift.
Watching the Eagles today, when I watch DeAndre Swift or run versus Saquon Barkley, Saquon Barkley's generational. And you know what else is really darn good? That offensive line. And you know what else is really good? Vic Fangio's defense. My God, do I miss that man.
Yeah, yeah, he did a really good job today. I mean, he's done a good job all season. That was a home run hire by the Eagles, and but Saquon Barkley is just ridiculous.
That first touchdown on the first scrimmage play the Eagles had, it was like, holy shit.
I mean, yeah, granted there was holes there, but he would have, an average or even above average running back probably gets,
Brought
10
down.
10 yards on that, 12 yards. His moves and that spin move to bounce off tacklers, like just he's ridiculous. Um,
It makes me really regret thinking how replaceable running backs are because I think what the last year or two has proven to me is that having a skilled running back means so much more than just doing a certain thing.
yeah, and I again, I don't think you need to have. I don't think we'll ever get back to the days where, running back position as a whole is super valued. Um, still think people are going to try to replace because there's a lot of running backs in this league that are on rookie deals that are very good, but the good ones are going to get paid.
Right. I mean, we're not talking about even half or a third. We're talking about like the top 5 or less percent. We're talking Derrick Henry. We're talking Saquon Barkley. Look at Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. Like he's looking like a legit dude. Obviously, run CMC, like Christian McCaffrey, like those are the top percent guys that just alone make a difference in a game. Because, there are plenty of instances where you can have a good solid running back, but the scheme will help carry it. Whether it's getting the right blocking, using him in the right situations, but like you can just give the ball to Derrick Henry at any point, and he's going to find a way to break loose and just bulldozer over guys. So it would be really good if the Bears had a guy like that and you had DeAndre Swift as your number two guy. But you can make DeAndre Swift's life easier and you can see a bit more production from him if you shore up that offensive line. Because guess what? Running in between the tackles, DeAndre Swift's not a power back. He's not going to be a guy who's going to bounce off guys or out muscle guys. He's going to shift around you. So if you give him more holes, then he can find it and then he can explode afterwards. He's got that explosive speed once he hits the hole, but he's not going to create it himself. He's not just going to bulldoze over somebody. And we saw that this year where, you look at the total yards and touchdowns this year, the numbers ain't bad, but the average yards per game, like 3.7 or whatever it was, that's lower than the elite running back.
Yeah, you look at quarterbacks and teams are going to overpay average and below average quarterbacks because they're really hard to replace. But running backs, I still think we're learning that the good ones are going to get paid. But if you are a guy that they don't feel like could be the dude, they'll replace you in a heartbeat with a draft pick because you can you can have you can find an average running back in the draft and even a above average running back. But I think the elite ones we're learning are going to get paid, and I think that will keep people happy. I know there was the league or the union was upset, the running backs were upset, and I think I think they found a happy medium where the top guys are going to get paid, and then everybody else just needs to become a top guy if they want to get paid.
Right, exactly.
And relating to that, I've seen a lot of people now that Ben Johnson's the coach and seeing what Saquon Barkley has done so far. Um, yeah, I've seen so many people mocking number 10 to the Bears, Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise State, who's a phenomenal running back. Don't get me wrong. I just don't want to keep making the same mistakes. Is we need offensive and defensive line help before we can start going to more skill positions. Um, if you tell me that you're going to sign uh, a a very good guard and center, and then you want to use that first pick for an edge rusher, and then with Andrew Billings coming back, go, okay, we think we're okay on the defensive line, and we've upgraded a lot on the offensive line, and you want to go to like a Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State in the second round, I'd be okay with that. But you need to improve that offensive line and that defensive line before you can start going to more skill positions.
Right, exactly.
Um, and I, I've s- I've seen people reach out to me, and I've seen some people post on Twitter of Trey Smith, the guard, the All-Pro guard from the Chiefs, that the Chiefs are not going to re-sign him, and I he is All-Pro during the regular season. He didn't give up a sack this season. He's, I think, only missed a couple of games. He's only 25. I can't picture a world where the Chiefs are going to be look at that guy and go, "Yeah, we're just going to let him go." I can't picture that scenario. So, I mean, if he hits free agency, then yeah, like the Bears would be stupid to not go after him. But I just don't see a world that the Chiefs don't retain him.
If they don't, they better pounce on that. Let me just say that.
I mean, he's fantastic, and he's only 25, and
Yeah.
he's healthy, and he's talented, and um, like he's one of those guys that just whatever you pay him, he's worth the money. But I literally don't see a scenario where the Chiefs can look at that and go, yeah, we're gonna let that guy go.
I mean, he's going to make bank, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm seeing like 20 to 21 million dollars a year. And worth it. Worth it. I mean, you put him next to Darnell Wright, and suddenly you've got a good right side of your offensive line.
yeah, I mean, if you were able to plug something elite like that in free agency, not with a draft pick, that opens up, an opportunity for you to draft another area where they could really use. I mean, let's remember too, we put so much emphasis on the offensive line. The D line needs help too, because there are two things you need. You need to stop the run, and you need to pressure the quarterback. Were the Bears very good at either last year?
I
No.
will say Ben Johnson made one specific name in regards to what you were talking about. Andrew Billings. Andrew Billings is the start and finish of the Bears' ability to stop the run. And they were good until he got injured. Then they were bad.
That is
And
true. Yes, they were.
so I think the Bears, both Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles, are going to be of the opinion that healthy Andrew Billings is like a free agent addition.
And
Um,
that's fair, but I still think you need depth though, because if he goes
oh yeah,
down
yeah, yeah.
again,
Absolutely. But you're not you don't use your first, second, or third round for
oh no.
depth. They definitely do need an edge rusher. Uh, so I mean, you look and where your desperate needs are edge rusher, two guards and a center. Those
Yes.
four positions. And you've got a ton of money in free agency that you can spend. And you've got uh, three picks in the top, what, 40,
Mm-hmm.
42.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be able to fill all four of those easily, easily. And if you wanted to, you could still draft one of the top running backs and uh and and add that to DeAndre Swift. There's no I'm still don't hate the DeAndre Swift signing. I think they did pay too much for him, but I think you're going to see Ben Johnson find a way to utilize him in different ways than just how the Bears have. They're going to try to get him in space because you see what havoc he wreaks when he gets in space. And it's
You need an
I
offense that lets him to do it, like I was saying earlier.
yeah, you're going to see better screen passes. You're going to see him. I bet you're going to see him line up in the slot as a wide receiver on at least a few times a game. Um, I think you're going to see a bunch of wheel routes and ways of getting him the ball. I think you're probably going to see some wildcat. Um, so I think there's going to be different ways for him to get touches where it's not necessarily running between the tackles.
Mm-hmm. Because how many times last year did we see him try to go to the outside and it just wasn't really materializing because he wasn't getting any blocking on that side or there wasn't really anything happening on that side? And, the hope here is with Ben Johnson, in the words of Mr. Hankey, we want our screen passes to wreck walls, not our screencasters suck balls.
Uh, yeah. So, um, yeah, I just there's there's a lot of opportunity to improve here, and that number 10 pick is as good as I think Ashton Genty is. I I just don't. I think it's number 10 on a running back based on where you are especially when there's some really good running backs in this draft. I think might be a reach. Um, and like it had they had a offensive line that was good and just hurt and they were getting everybody healthy again, I'm like, okay, that's a different story. But you do need an edge rusher pretty badly, and you need the whole interior of your offensive line. And I'm not completely saying that, Braxton Jones, is your go-to left tackle. I just I keep saying, and I'll keep saying this, that he's he's average to like he's the average range. Could you replace him? Sure, it's not easy to replace an average left tackle. It just isn't. The league has told you that for a long time. Can you do it? Absolutely. Is it easy? Nope. Um, they don't come up in free agency very often, and usually to get one in the draft, you need to invest a top 10, top 12 pick. Um, and this year I don't love the top tackles. So that number 10 pick, I just don't see it as a left tackle, but you could get a absolutely stud guard or an edge rusher. So, don't be surprised if the Bears, if they can't trade back or they can't trade up, which who knows. Um, don't be surprised if they pick an edge rusher and address and attack the offensive line through free agency and those second round picks.
Yeah. Now, speaking of picks, there is something kind of interesting, and it's really worth noting.
Is it
Have you
Ian
been hearing?
Cunningham?
Yes, we've been hearing a lot of rumblings about that lately, right?
You know, the door was shut because he had interviewed for the weird hybrid GM spot in Tennessee. He was one of the finalists for that. And then when he didn't get it, that door sort of shut because there was no other openings for a GM. And we're like, okay, well then he'll come back to the Bears for another year. But then Jacksonville went full Jacksonville. And they after after they were rebuffed by multiple head coaches, they fired their GM. And that spot opened up. And from what I'm hearing, Ian Cunningham is a real possibility for that job.
And for those of you who don't know, that would result in a third round comp pick in the 25 and 23 drafts.
26, 25, and 26.
20, yeah, sorry, 25, 26. Sorry, delete.
Um, yeah, so there were two third round pick compensatories for the Bears, and they would, the first one would come right away in this upcoming draft. So that would mean that the Bears would have a top 10 pick in the first round, two top 10 picks in the second round, a top 10 pick in the third round, and a compensatory pick in the third round.
Like getting two third round picks for the next two drafts, that ain't nothing.
No, I mean, well, based on Ryan Pohl's history of drafting third rounders, it might be, but that shouldn't be.
Shut it.
they should let fans vote on who they want in the third round.
Well, hey, guess what, Sean? I got good news. You know who's gonna be in his ear during those picks?
Benjamin Johnson.
Exactly.
So, I don't want to say assuming. If Ian Cunningham does leave to go be the GM of Jacksonville, which I think would be a great job for him. Shad Khan is crazy, and I don't think he's doing things right. But he's got a lot of money, and I think he really does want to win. Like, I don't think it's one of those. I don't think it's one of those like he's not Mark Davis crazy, and he's not Dan Snyder crazy. Which I love watching Dan Snyder be salty that his former team is doing well. It's like straight out of Ted Lasso. But you have an owner, he can't get out of his own way. And I think that would be a good fit for Ian Cunningham.
And he's got a quarterback.
You've got a quarterback, and you can't be judged on the head coach because they were hired before you. So you get a grace period of being on the job, and then if you need to replace that head coach, I had nothing to do with it. You hired him first, and then you hired me. And you get to hire that next head coach once you've had some time under your belt in the job. It could be a soft landing for him. So I would hope, but I'm going to throw a name out there that expressed interest in potentially having this job. It is a former Chicago Bear player who happens to be the best broadcaster in the NFL.
Oh, Greg Olson.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
I don't think so either. I think he's smart. I think he knows what he's talking about. I think he's very well polished. You listen to him speak even on like local radio. I think he was with Waddle and Sylvie either last week or the week before. And I listened to him. I'm like, man, first of all, boners to you, Mike Martz, for, he doesn't fit my system. Another reason why I loved hearing Ben Johnson say what he said. But also the fact that the Bears would love to have a guy like that in the building, I would think.
I mean, he's well liked. He's well respected. That adds like some sort of cachet to your team because he is super well respected because he has. I mean, I know that Tom Brady was given the number one seat to be in the announcer team, but Greg Olson is the best announcer, and he has worked on that craft, and he is very knowledgeable, and he's played the game. He played the game at a very high level, and he has an attachment to the Bears. They were the team that drafted him. Um, and he has an interest in that, and he's just very smart and thoughtful on how he, his opinions on how things should be. Like I don't think that's a terrible idea.
No, I don't either.
Um, would they hire him to be in that position and learn some of the because usually that's you hire somebody as a scout or a player personnel guy and then they work their way up. Um, you know, how would that work? Kind of bypassing those early steps? I don't know, but uh, you know, I still don't think it's a bad idea to have another smart guy in the building that has played for that team. It adds cachet to both around the league when you're at Indianapolis at the combine and you're talking to other GMs and other front office folks is the the respect that he's built as a player and as a broadcaster, like that's invaluable. Um, and also just having that outsider perspective, that's you know that's that would be huge going into the draft.
Well, especially like you talk about outsider position. He was once a Bear and then he goes elsewhere and then he's been around the league, as a media member and he sees how other teams operate and approach things. There, like you said, there's value in that.
Right. So I don't think it's a terrible idea. And I wonder if his words were heard um, by the powers that be.
Well, I hope so. And I mean, it's a pretty big radio station he was on, a very big local radio station, a lot of listeners. So, and I think it was the subject talk of a lot of NFL, media members. People heard him talk and, his name alone, whenever he's talking football, a lot of people listen. So I think a lot of ears were reached when he just did that interview alone.
Yeah, I would absolutely love it. I think that would be a home run. Um, he's very well liked. He's he's hard nosed and he's opinionated, but in a really productive, thoughtful way. Um, so I don't think there's any bad reason that you don't do that. Even if it's not like assistant GM. Um, there if you find a spot for him, like I think that's huge, bringing him in the building.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and I quickly looked, and the Bears will have pick 10 in the first round. In the second round, they'll have pick 39, 41, and pick 72 in the third round. And then if Ian Cunningham goes, it'll be a compensatory pick in the third round. Then they don't have a fourth rounder, but they'll have their own fifth rounder. They'll have the Steelers sixth rounder, the Browns seventh rounder, and the Bengals seventh rounder.
The Bengals seventh rounder, that was the Khalil Herbert trade, wasn't it?
I believe that was.
Kind of forgot about that.
So yeah, it's the sixth and seventh picks, not not super valuable picks. But if you get that third rounder, having five picks in the first three rounds is big,
Yes, yes, it is.
especially for a team that is looking to add talent.
Get all you can get.
I kind of wanted to move on to baseball, if you were good with that.
Yeah, we have some notable news today.
Yeah. So, I had something else I want to do and I still want to do it, but, it altered what I wanted to do slightly. The Cubs made a trade with the Houston Astros, to trade for closer Ryan Presley.
Yeah, and so it sounded like this deal has been in the works a few days, but Ryan Presley had to waive his no trade clause. And, him and his family took some time, evaluated, and it sounds like he's going to be waiving it. And from everything I'm seeing, it's going to be a pitching prospect from the Cubs, not one of the higher ones, but I think he's like around the 30th rank, and he's going to be traded. There's going to be some of the money being eaten in Houston. It basically sounds like a salary dump for Houston, and that's why they've been trading multiple guys, several of them to the Cubs. But yeah, Ryan Presley obviously has been very good for a very long time, and he was an absolute dog in the 2022 postseason.
Oh,
Really
they
good.
don't win that World Series unless he's great, and he was great.
He was great. And now, obviously, he is older. He might have lost a tick on his fastball, but the numbers last year were still really, really good. But I think that if you are the Cubs and you are trying to build as much depth as possible in that pen and give yourself as many options, you make trades like this. You go out and you get guys that have experience, that have plus stuff, which Ryan Presley does. And listen, you got Porter Hoge as an option. You have him as an option. You need to go out and you need to get a few more guys. David Robertson is available. Stanek is available. The FIP and the ERA the last year or two haven't been great, but high miss stuff, really good velocity. So if you can kind of mold that, you can be able to, make a change within your bullpen dynamic with moves like that. And if you use Tommy Hotovy's pitch lab experience, maybe you unlock something there. But obviously, in this situation, you've been trying to get a number of higher end guys because I think they made the mistake last year and they realized that it's like, okay, you can't just get like Hector Neris, a somewhat decently named guy, but rely on everything else. You're getting an actual name guy in Ryan Presley, and you add another guy with him, and you got Presley and him, and you hope that Julian Merriweather is healthy. Obviously, you got Eli Morgan early in the offseason, so give yourself as much insurance as possible, and don't blow a million saves in the first few months. That's what I really ask for.
Yeah. So where I was going with this is, I was sitting down earlier in the weekend, and I was like, for both the Cubs and the Sox, if and I know that there's going to be more moves that are made, but as of today, January 26th, if the season were to start today, what would the starting lineup and the pitching rotation and the closer look like for both the Cubs and the Sox? And it's a little easier on one side than the other, but I wanted to go through this and then on top of that, where where do we think there's realistic places to go, and what sort of moves would you like to see?
Okay.
So I think the Cubs is going to be an easier roadmap here. Um, so first base, I think it's
Michael Bush.
Michael Bush. I think that's barring any injury, that's pretty much a lock. Uh, Second base doesn't sound like Nico Horner is being traded.
No, but they did sign John Birdie, and John Birdie is probably your insurance guy for either Matt Shaw, not performing well, and or Nico Horner inevitably missing the beginning of the season due to the recovery from his surgery.
Right. Um, so, but the expectation though is that you have um you have Nico Horner be your second base guy, and Birdie, um, he's what was he, a $2 million 1 year deal, something like
Yeah,
that.
very small deal. He's going to be your primary bench guy. He is, in my opinion, a better version of Nick Madrigal. He's quicker, he's smarter on the bases,
He's like
he walks
400 years
more.
old.
Yeah, he's older, yes. But on paper, I don't mind it. So not much power like Nick Madrigal, but if he could do everything else he can do, then you take it.
Shortstop, Dansby Swanson.
Hmm.
Third base, probably Shaw right now.
Yeah, and I'm not biting on the Bregman stuff.
No, I mean, would the Cubs, if they could get him on a short-term deal for higher AAV, do it? I think so. Um, but I hear that there's more. Oh, excuse me. I hear there's several teams that are open to a 5-year deal with him. And if that's the case, I don't think the Cubs have any shot of signing him. And the fact that the Cubs helped the Astros create some financial space, it feels like going back to Houston is probably the most likely scenario.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Because I would be intrigued by the Bregman short deal type scenario, but yeah, we'll see what actually happens. Part of me thinks that the Cubs are being used as leverage, so
I think so too. I would like to see them bring in a somebody that could be a starter if Shaw either is not ready or goes into a slump or for whatever gets injured. I don't like the depth that we have. I would like to see them bring in a veteran to compete and or back up uh, Shaw.
yeah.
Like that's one of my biggies right there. Um, Happen left, Tucker and right, PCA in center, Amaya catching, Saya DH.
Yep.
Um, so position wise, other than third base, um, uh, are there any other moves position wise that you feel the Cubs are uh, should do or will do?
I mean, unless it's depth, I don't think they're going to do anything more. There's no real spot, I think, to really put anything anywhere. I mean, again, barring like a Nico Horner trade, where if you traded Nico Horner and all of a sudden you're like, oh, move Shaw to second and put Bregman at third, but assuming that's not happening, pretty much every spot in the depth is pretty much full because Miguel Amaya is your catcher one, Carson Kelly's your veteran guy. They took care of that. Um,
My other
Mike,
question would be, what's your depth in the outfield? Because the guys you have in your 40 man are your future guys, Canario, Casey, Alcantara. Um, those are your future guys. So, do you want to have them, you know, sitting on the bench and not getting the at bats, or do you want to? Again, I kind of miss Mike Talkman. Like this is one of those spots where he's like, fill in spot starter and depth.
right.
I mean, you could always put Saya out there, but I don't think they want to.
No, and I mean, the other thing about John Burry that I mentioned, he could play outfield too, and he's a speedy guy. So if you have to, I mean, the Cubs have several kind of super utility guys on their current roster. I don't know if Vidal Brujan is going to be around by the time opening day actually comes. So
Yeah, but I would like to see like a Talkman type guy. That that would be nice. Yeah, I just don't like having the young guys not get the at bats and just be depth.
right.
But I don't want somebody that's going to block the future either.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're kind of at a crossroads in some areas, and I mean that's why you traded Bellinger. I know it's easy to say they just don't want to pay the money. While that is partially true, and the actual goal of the trade itself was to dump him in the salary, I don't think they wanted to dump him just because they didn't want to pay him. Yeah, I mean, you were at a crossroads. If Bush is going to be your everyday guy, and Kyle Tucker is going to be your everyday guy, and PCA is going to be your everyday guy, you just weren't going to be able to put him anywhere full time. So you're kind of in this, the Cubs are in this weird spot where, like, you look at their lineup and you say, you wish it was better at times still, but where where do you make the alterations without really mixing things up? You like what you have, obviously, in Kyle Tucker. Ian Happ, for the hate that he gets, I think is a very good, solid player. PCA's sky is the limit. Dansby Swanson's Dansby Swanson. You're putting your stake in Michael Bush. I mean, third is really kind of one of the wild cards right now because you're going to be likely depending on a prospect, but you look at most of these areas and it's like, well, you're kind of set there. And I don't think this lineup is bad, but I don't think it's elite either.
It has the ability to be really darn good though. Is Hap at his best is isn't, a borderline all-star level. And Seiya is a really good hitter when he's healthy.
Yes.
And hopefully, the not having him in the outfield is beneficial because he's not a good outfielder. But hopefully having him at DH keeps him healthy for the long haul.
Yes. And I don't disagree because, I mean, in the second half, we saw spurts where the offense was like scoring 14 runs a game. Obviously, one of the big things is we know the Cubs tend to be boomer bust no matter who it is. But I just wish in a perfect world, if this team just had one more alpha on it. Like I said, they needed to get an alpha. They got one. Kyle Tucker is an alpha. And I think Seiya Suzuki is darn good. But if you had one more just bopper, you had one more 35, 40 home run, all-star MVP level type guy, then you would really feel good. And it's easy to say that when the top lineups in the NL are going to be the Dodgers, the Braves when healthy, probably the Phillies. You got Harper, Schwarber, Castellanos, those guys, Trey Turner. And then you'll have Juan Soto in the New York Mets. We'll see what Pete Alonso does, but
Pete Alonso's that wild card, and
yeah,
like he's a bat that I would love to have in the lineup. I just don't know where you put him positionally.
it's not happening. It's just not happening. And
I agree. I'm saying is I would love to have that power bat in the lineup.
me too. Me too.
I just don't know where you'd put him.
And that's kind of the other thing I have with the Cubs. I still think they're a little short in the power department. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying you compare to the home runs that the Cubs hit to the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Braves. It's just not. It's just not the same. I don't think.
I mean, where we saw the Cubs do well is they had a lot of guys make contact and you didn't have these giant gaping strikeout holes necessarily all the time. And so you had guys cycling through the order, scoring runs when they were playing well. But
they can get on base. They give good at bats. I'll give them that.
So when what happens is if you don't have those big boppers in your lineup, you have to have multiple guys do their job well to get that run across. Whereas, a Pete Alonso or Aaron Judge, like one swing and they've added runs to the board. Doesn't matter what the next guy does.
Yeah, and I mean, you can also look at the Cubs and say, in terms of having 20 home run guys, you got a handful of them. Tucker, Seiya, Happ, Swanson. You had Bellinger last year, but you're switching that with Tucker, who can hit 30 plus. You just wish you had more guys whose home run ceilings were higher. Like if you had two or three 30 home run guys.
I would like a 40 home run guy.
Haven't had one since 2005. Derek Lee.
Yeah. So, um, but you are where you are. You're not going to
Hmm.
add, you're not, there's things you can add to this lineup. Adding a 30 plus home run guy is not one of them. It's not a realistic.
At this point now.
Um, if Pete Alonso could play third base, I'd be like, okay, maybe we can reconsider that. But he's DH first base, and you have a DH and a first baseman, and you're not adding the salary to get a Pete Alonso at this point.
By the way, wouldn't it be hilarious if we talked about how unlikely getting Bregman is, and then all of a sudden we hear like tomorrow from Jeff Passan the Cubs are closing in on Bregman? Wouldn't that be wild?
I wouldn't hate it,
Oh no,
but
neither would I. I just think it would be wild.
yeah, I mean, of the outside chance things, that's probably the most likely of them. Like, I mean, if Jeff Passan announced Cubs are signing Pete Alonso, you would see my jaw hang down to the floor. I would be so
You're right,
shocked.
right.
And then I would immediately expect a corresponding move of, you know, uh, is does that mean
Some
Bush is
sort of
going?
shift in roster.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because he's taking either Say is getting traded, Bush is getting traded, Bush is moving positions because Pete Alonso is first base or DH.
right.
Um, so then that goes to our starting rotation. I have it right now, and who knows how things shake out in spring training, which is coming up in like what 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Um, is Steele, Tyone, Shota, Assad, and Wicks.
So I have Steele, Tyone, Shota, um, probably Assad, and then maybe either Boyd or Ray. I feel like one of Boyd or Ray is going to be given the chance to start in the rotation. Wicks is kind of weird because I don't know exactly where he could potentially fit in. If he's not in the starting rotation, then okay, maybe you make him like a longer relief guy, but I think it makes sense to have him in rotation. But they went out and got Ray and Boyd, and both of them can be in the bullpen. Not saying they won't, but my early gut feeling is one of those guys is going to be in the rotation. Could be wrong, but we'll see.
I'm not doubting it. I'm just throwing that out there as that's my guess right now. Um, who knows how they're gonna things play out, how spring training works. I would. This is where I would love either a trade, or I don't even know who's out there still in free agency. I would like another real. Now I'm not saying a frontline guy, but a like another number three type, like a middle of the order guy that pushes Assad to be your five. So it would be like Steele, Shota, new guy, Tyone, Assad.
Hmm.
That's what I would really like. Um, I just don't know how that happens or where that comes into play.
Right.
And then right now I have closer as Ryan Presley.
I mean, if you acquire him going into spring training, you got to put him in that spot.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what my guess is for where we are, January 26th. Again, spring training doesn't start for another 2 weeks. There are still moves that can be made. There's still some free agents out there. There's trades that could happen as of January 26th. That's sort of my overarching opinion on the roster as it stands.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like, I don't hate it. I'm just I don't
I'm
I
not I'm
also
not
don't love
giddy
it.
about it. I'm not giddy, but I don't see them making a run at a championship, but maybe you can win the division. Maybe. I just, until Milwaukee goes away, they're still not just going to go away in my eyes. And I got to tell you, a healthy young Reds team with Tito scares me a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to be world beaters, but I think that team is going to be more in the mix than some people think.
We'll see. We'll see on that point. I'm not discounting it. They have a lot of talent.
They
It's
got to be healthy, though.
they got to be healthy, and uh, it it's really hard to compete when you don't have the financial resources to add front end talent. And
Yes.
you look at the Dodgers. They've got homegrown guys that are really good, and but then they just add players, and how it's really tough to compete with. And I know this is just for the division because it's in the NL or even for the World Series, unless you're just adding massive tier talent, I don't know how you necessarily compete with the Dodgers. But so you're looking at the division, and I think this division, we'll laugh about this in 7 months and how wrong we were, but I think it's pretty wide open. The Brewers, I think, are going to be, solid again. I think the Cubs will be better than they were. I just don't know how much better. Um, I think the Reds will be good. I think Pittsburgh's got a lot of talent. Um,
They got a lot of talent. They're not going to be a pushover. I don't see them winning the division, but they're not going to be a pushover, especially if Paul Skeens is pitching. I mean, they got a nice rotation, and so yeah, they're not going to make the big moves. But again, they're not going to be the 100 plus loss guaranteed win every time team.
yeah, so it's, um, I like there's and the Cardinals have that, voodoo magic. Um, so you never count them out, but they don't have a ton of talent.
Knock on wood, I'm not as scared of the Cardinals this year. I think they'll find a way to be pains in the asses, but damn me if I'm wrong. But I'm not as afraid of them as I've been in years past.
Yeah. Jack Flaherty's still available, isn't he?
He is.
Okay. Um, and I don't think
I
he,
wanted the Cubs to give him a go.
I don't think there's any draft pick compensation that tied to him. I don't think he got a qualifying offer.
Yeah.
Um, that uh, that would not bother me.
Not at all.
Um,
I've wanted them to do it.
I'm looking who else is still available. Da, da.
Flaherty's kind of the big starter name that's available. That's remaining, I should say. Well, technically, Max Scherzer has been working out with teams. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh yeah, Max Scherzer. Um, but uh, yeah, I mean those are the biggie names. I Yeah, I think we've talked about everybody. Scherzer, but guy, he's 200 years old,
Yeah, he's ancient.
and I think he's probably going to go to somebody that he thinks has a World Series chance. Oh my God,
Yeah, I don't know.
Watch him go to the Dodgers.
What is their roster? 50 men?
Oh my God. How I just want to see the Twitter meltdown if the Dodgers announce that they signed Max Scherzer.
It would be really funny, even though he's just old as hell.
Uh, yeah, but you know what? He's he would still be better than, you know, multiple people on the Cubs rotation.
Maybe.
Okay, if he's not better than Steele,
No,
not better than Shota,
no.
what about Tyone?
Uh, at this point, I mean, what is he, 40, 41, right? Around there?
I think he might even be older than that.
He's
Uh,
40.
oh, okay.
Well, I mean, last year, a 3.95 ERA and a 1.2 whip. How much did he pitch, though? Like, I don't think it was that much, was it? It was, yeah, it was n 9 starts. He made 9 starts. The year before, he made 152. So, I mean, maybe he could sign somewhere and be a halfway decent for what he is at this point type of pitcher. I mean, yeah, if he was like a 3.90 ERA, 4.20 FIP type pitcher for 40, 41 years old and can still strike out maybe 8 batters per 9 innings, not walk guys,
Would you like to know what his projections are?
sure.
So there's the Steamer projections have him 128 innings pitched, 396 ERA, 1.16 whip, 133 K, 33 walks,
What was the ERA? I'm sorry.
396.
Huh, it's not bad.
Um, his ATC projection is 388 ERA, 1.13 whip, 101 Ks versus 25 walks.
For
It,
40, 41 years old.
I mean, that would add that would add a cachet to your rotation.
Might sell some extra tickets too for Tommy Boy.
I'm saying I wouldn't hate it. I don't think it's realistic because he's if he's coming back, it's probably for to be a back end guy on a World Series champion
Yeah, and I
caliber
know that.
team.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
White Sox. This one's gonna be fun because you're gonna be like, I don't know who that is.
Who are you people?
First base, Andrew Vaughn.
Uh-huh.
Second base, Lenine Sosa.
Um, isn't oh well, don't they have Josh Rojas now? They signed Josh Rojas to a free agent
I
deal
I have him at third base.
over Brian Ramos. You think they want to try to get Brian Ramos those at bats?
Let's this is what I have right now, and this is just completely wild guesses because there was so many people I didn't know on the
Well,
roster.
why don't you give your lineup and I'll
All
give
right,
mine.
sure. I have Vaughn at first, Sosa at second, Brooks Baldwin at short, Rojas at third, Benintendi in left, Talkman in right, Robert in center, Corey Lee catching, and Miguel Vargas at DH.
Okay, so I got Corey Lee catcher, Vaughn at first, Rojas second, Ramos third, Lenin Sosa at short, Andrew Benintendi left, Luis Robert center, Mike Talkman right. Now, the one thing that I wonder is shortstop. Is that going to be Brooks or Sosa? I really don't know. Um, I guess that they would want Colson Montgomery to make the roster at some point this year. I just don't know when that'll be. Um, Last year was a bit of a struggle for him. I think he had some injuries too, so he's going to try to come back because in 2023 in the minors, he was a beast. He put up a 939 OPS. So if you get him healthy and hitting again, then he's going to be part of the equation eventually. I just don't know what they're going to do to evaluate him. Are they going to, watch how he does in spring? Are they going to call him up quicker? Are they not? I don't know. So that's a mystery to me, and maybe some more diehard Sox fans could shed better light on that than me. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
And who's your DH?
I guess Miguel Vargas. I guess.
I don't love this lineup.
No, neither do I.
There's not going to be a lot of runs scored here.
So Oscar Colas is still on the team technically.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. Uh, rotation.
Um, John
Uh,
Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt.
this is one of those major league moments where nobody knows who anybody is, and like, here's our roster for a spring invite. Like, he's dead. We'll take him off the
Cross him
list.
off then.
I have Perez, Cannon, uh, Martin, Burke, Wilson.
Well, Drew Thorpe is hurt, right? He's
hurt.
recovering.
He's hurt, and I just saw the other day he had a setback.
Oh,
So
really?
yes.
Oh, jeez.
So I'm not counting on him until, at least not at the start of the season.
Yeah, it'll be some time.
Because I think if everything would have gone well, he would have been available in sometime during spring training. But there's a setback, and I don't know how much it's setting him back. But if he's not getting in there right away in spring training, he's not going to be ready to start the season.
Yeah. Who's the opening day start? Is it Davis Martin? Is Davis Martin the opening day starter?
Maybe. I don't know.
Is it Jonathan Cannon? He pitched a bit last year.
I mean, Mully Haw asked Getz that question, and he did not have an answer for that.
So even he doesn't know.
Yeah, he tried to sell this. Well, last year at this point we didn't know who it was, and then, Garrett Crochet ended up having a really good year for us, and I'm gonna say Jonathan Cannon. That's my guess. Um,
I feel like it's him or Davis Martin.
Probably. I mean, who knows? Who knows what? I mean, this might be the worst starting rotation in baseball. We shall see.
Sean Burke. Oh, he's a young guy. Okay. Yeah, I'm just okay. All right, we'll see.
And then I have Justin Anderson as your closer.
I guess. I have no better answer.
I mean, I'm looking at their 40-man roster, and whew, it doesn't look awesome. I mean, there's some young guys on there, and we'll see how that plays out. But
Well, and that's what people are going to be watching. They're going to watch the young guys play. You're going to see if Luis Robert bounces back and he gets traded eventually. You're going to flip the likes of Talkman and Rojas at the deadline. I can't believe Lenin Sosa is still here.
where's Tuki Toussaint these days?
Uh,
I know he signed
overseas.
somewhere. I know he went somewhere else. I just don't remember
Like,
where he went
is
to.
somewhere else as in a major league team?
Uh, let's see. Where is he now? Let's see. What's his Wikipedia say? Oh, no,
Wikipedia.
he is a free agent. He is a free agent.
Fly the beacon, the Tuki Toussaint beacon.
It's like the bat signal, the Tukey symbol.
The Tuki signal.
We need an opening day starter.
Tuki. He jumps in like a beater. It's like an Uncle Buck car. Boom.
Uh, Yeah, they're gonna light the beacon of Gondor, and, and you're gonna see Tukey Toussaint ride up from the sunset.
on the Dan Ryan.
He's like he's like now that the express lanes are open on the Kennedy, I'm coming into town.
I'm coming in hot.
Uh, yeah, so the White Sox, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting spring training. I will say that. And hopefully we get good news from the White Sox. I mean, they had White Sox Fest, but hopefully we get good news and you see some young guys take steps forward and establish themselves at positions because I I, I can I can deal with the White Sox being bad if you see some sort of progression and path. Like if you see a couple young guys that grasp onto a position and they fend off everybody else, and you're like, okay, I'm like I can live with that, even if their record stinks, which it's probably going to. But I just don't want to see a bunch of old ass veterans that are not long term that are just locking positions down so they can flip them for at the deadline. Like that's not what I want.
Yeah, let the kids play where you can. And
Yes.
yeah, so although you mentioned the Sox Fest, they had that Sox Fest live at that local theater right out in Bridgeport.
Yeah.
I saw some pictures, I saw some footage. Obviously, they celebrated the 20th anniversary of the 2005 White Sox, but we do have to mention Mark Burley.
Oh yeah, he's getting a statue.
He is getting a statue, and I would assume they're going to put it by Paul Konerko
I don't know.
out there
Yeah,
on that outfield concourse, I believe that's where it is. But obviously people can nitpick stats back and forth, but I think for what he did for the White Sox, it was just uh it was just an amazing run that he had for a guy who was so humble and a guy who was so dedicated to his team and his craft. And I think that when you win a World Series and you throw a no-hitter, a perfect game, and you're as consistent as you are, and you make the game so quick, and he was such a good fielder. I think it's great for White Sox fans that they get to see a statue of him.
yeah. Gary texted me the other day and it was like, if you were to pick one pitcher to make the Hall of Fame, Andy Pettitte or Mark Burley, who would it be and why? And I think I said I wouldn't pick either, but it would probably be Andy Pettit, but not confidently. Like I don't think I can confidently pick one over the other. Um, yeah, I started digging into the stats, and I was like, yeah, they're like stats wise, they're like the same pitcher. Um, so I said Andy Pettit because he was a much better strikeout pitcher. Um, and his CWPA was a lot better. And I know this is a team stat and not a player stat. Way more championships, but I, I probably don't put either one in. But man, it's a little bit of a toss up, and you couldn't probably convince me confidently of either one or over the other.
Yeah, I hear you. I do. But I think one thing's for sure, outside of Cooperstown, what he meant to the Sox obviously means the world, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, I mean if you're having a White Sox, you know, Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, whatever, he's on it. Like he's really important to that team.
yes,
He's much
for
more.
for a long time.
Yes, if for a career, Mark Burley is much more important to the White Sox than Andy Pettitte is to the Yankees.
Yeah. I mean, the Yankees had so many just amazing players. It's
I
hard
mean,
to.
they've got what 27 championships and so many just like Hall of Fame of the Hall of Fame players that Andy Pettitte just doesn't. He's a fart in the wind compared to them. Mark Burley is an important player in White Sox history, period.
Right.
Do you want to talk Bulls or Blackhawks?
Not really. Not really. Blackhawks lost again. Patrick Williams stinks. What else is there to say?
Patrick Williams really stinks. Um, and was he the first year of a 5-year, $90 million contract?
$90 million to average like what, 7 points a game?
I think he had two on Saturday. Uh,
Hey,
but
woo.
honestly, I think like the prudent thing to do for the Bulls is make sure you're bad enough to keep your top 10 pick so you get to pick in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like honestly the most important thing right now is so does that mean trading Vooch or Zach? I'm starting to go in the camp of maybe don't trade Zach. I just don't think you're going to get the value um, of a guy that is that proficient of a scorer. And really, he's just going to like you're going to take on a bad contract to even out the money. Like I just don't see a good trade for him. Now Vooch, I think you can move, and even if that's a dump, like he's on borrowed time. Like he's on the back nine of his career. He's not part of your future. Like I would just dump him for whatever you can get. Not saying he's bad. Just if you can't get good value, I think just dumping him from your team helps you preserve that top 10 pick.
Right.
Um, and let's see the Blackhawks. They traded Isaac Phillips, which I'm fine with. Um, they got a 21-year-old player and Dmitry Kuzmin. They reassigned Wyatt Kaiser. Meh, I think that's overdue. And they recalled Del Mastro. Okay. Uh, Taylor Hall got shipped off to the Hurricanes.
Mm-hmm. In a very weird deal, but
It's
you
a
got a
very
third round
weird deal.
pick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you ended up with your own third round pick back.
Yeah.
And you're taking on half of the money of a player that was never on your team.
Hey, we're like the Coyotes.
We are the new Coyotes. Except we didn't get retained a player. We just retained their money, which I think is a good sign. I know there's been a lot of debate lately about Kyle Davidson and how this rebuild is going. And I just have a few things I want to say about that is I think it's a good sign that you're not taking on the player and the contract. You can take the contract on, that's fine. But taking on the player, I think if you're not taking on the player, I think that's telling you that you would rather your young players get that playing time. And I think that's a good thing. And when you have so many young players on your team, um, this the growth the growth and the linear the progression and the growth of a team is not linear. You're gonna see bad, good, and fluctuation. And I think it was Scott Power said this. You have Colton Dock scored his first NHL goal and has shown signs of being a potential future piece. Lucas Reichel is coming around again. The defense includes 4 players 23 years old or younger as of Friday. You have a 19-year-old Leshkanov and Korchinski, who's 20, are still in Rockford and expected to be key players in coming years. You have Green, Moore, and Rinzel are expected to come. Nick Lardis, Martin Miziak, Dominic James, and Aiden Thompson to the talent pool for next year. Roman Kantserov, one of KHL's top players, and Sasha Boisvert, one of the NCAA's top freshmen, aren't that far behind either. You have a whole lot of talent coming in the next couple of years. It's just sucky now, and so I'm hoping that this is a good sign. things to come and long-term success with this. But boy, does it really hurt and suck right now.
Yes, yes, it does. Yes, it does. But hey, at least some of the kids are playing pretty well. I mean, Nazar's looking better.
Yeah,
Reichel's looks a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Nazar and Bedard playing together really well.
Which is a good sign. It's something to hang your hat on.
Yeah. And it's wild for how bad the Blackhawks are. San Jose is worse.
Just shocking.
It's super shocking. And those two are like significantly behind Buffalo, who's the third worst team. So you know, it's you're expecting probably another top 4 or 5 pick in this year's draft.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll be done playing for draft picks after that for a while.
Oh my God, that would be nice. I mean, it's as fun as it is to draft like, a player that people have heard of in the NHL. You're like, oh, I heard of that guy. That's nice, but man, it'd be also nice to just win some games.
Yeah, occasionally. That would be nice.
Was there anything else you want to add?
Nope, I've said my piece, but looks like it's a rematch of a
Man.
few years ago. Eagles, Chiefs, just what everyone wanted, right?
I think the whole world was rooting for Buffalo to win this game.
Many of them were, yes. Many of them were.
I think if you take out the Kansas City area, I think the rest of the NFL wanted the Buffalo Bills to win. Yeah, it's the Chiefs and the Eagles.
I just really wanted Josh Allen to win a ring. I did. But you can't bet against the Chiefs and Mahomes. You just can't.
Nope. And I'm expecting them to win the Super Bowl.
Me too.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, etc. Share this podcast with your friends. That's how we grow the show. Follow us on social media at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com, or ShyFanPat2 for Alex on Twitter/X, or AlexanderJPatCreative.com for all the cool stuff that Alex does. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.